Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Plant Innovation Project Template, Episode 1. This webinar is brought to you by Applied Software. My name is Misty Scott, and I am pleased to be your moderator today. We'll go ahead and begin with a quick intro video on how to get the most out of this webinar and interact with us today. Okay, here we go.
Hi, and welcome to this Applied Software webinar. We're glad you could join us today. Get more out of the webinar by clicking on the icons at the bottom of your screen. You can resize these. This button leads to resources. This button adjusts the volume. Just don't push this one. I'm watching you. Be sure to find Applied Software on social media and on our website, asti.com, where we'll empower you to discover what's possible. You can also find a complete schedule of upcoming events, on-demand webinars, and training on our calendar at asti.com/calendar. This is being recorded for your convenience. You'll be receiving an email with the recording link for future reference. And make sure to stick around. We'll answer questions at the end. See you there.
As the video mentioned, you can find a schedule of upcoming events, webinars, and training on our calendar at asti.com/calendar. So make sure that you check that out. All right, I am super pleased to announce our speakers today. David Wolf is a Director of Plant and Process Services at Applied Software. With over 16 years of experience in his field, David focuses on working to modernize and implement data-driven design and construction for industrial and piping-focused clients. Caleb Flowers is a plant implementation specialist at Applied Software with a demonstrated history of working in the oil and gas industry. He is highly skilled in Plant 3D, laser scanning, and piping design with experience in Autodesk, AutoCAD, Plant 3D, Navisworks, and Recap Pro. Thank you guys for joining us today. I know that we do have a poll question before we begin. So I'm just going to go ahead and read this out. Super simple question here. Are you using a project template with your Plant 3D projects? And just simply yes or no. And I'll allow some time here for the answers to come through.
Yeah, awesome.
What do you guys think is going to come through it?
I'm hoping it's a yes. It's probably going to be a no for a lot of people. A lot of people, they just, and that's kind of why we're doing this webinar, is a lot of people just jump right into the project. Every project's a new project. So not necessarily the best workflow, but we're here to help guide them. So.
Perfect. We've got about half of our submissions in. I'll just read it one more time here. Are you using a project template with your Plant 3D projects? Simply yes or no. And while we are awaiting a couple of the other submissions that are coming through, just wanted to let everyone know who is attending today. Throughout the webinar, you can go ahead and plug in any questions you have in the chat box, any comments, and we can either go on, to the chat box throughout, or we'll have time at the end to answer those questions. All right, looks like we have got most of our answers in, so let's take a look.
Hey,
what do you guys
awesome.
think?
That's great.
Nice.
Well, yeah, even if you are using a project template, I think we're going to kind of cover some things, hopefully some questions that you may not have even asked yourself yet. So hopefully we can get some more info on that.
Fantastic. I know you've got some really awesome content for us today, guys, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Okay. So jumping right into it, this is kind of, if you could say, the why. So this is the why we are doing this. We've noticed in our previous work experience in piping design, and really this is also stemming from our Plant Innovation Board. This is the biggest thing that they feel like people need to work on right now, and that's project templates, having a project template. And the reasons why: absolutely the time lost when setting up projects individually, missing configuration items when they're set up individually, and then new users misconfiguring the project. And that's just, let's say somebody new comes into your company and they're like, okay, I'll start the project. And if they're not using a project template, preferably a pre-configured project template, then it's like starting from scratch, just reinventing the wheel every time you want to start a project. So, and like I said, along with that comes inconsistent symbols and data and things like that. Dave, you want to handle the next two?
Yeah. So along with things just not getting set up right, there's a couple other aspects to the project templates. And some of this isn't really just the project template itself, like outside of Plant 3D, what happens, where do your projects live? You know, this is part of the conversation that you need to have when you set up project templates is, where do they live? What is the process for creating them? What happens when you're done? When you have an active project that you're ready to archive, where's it going to go? You know, are you going to be able to recover the data, or are you just going to basically dump it and say, you know, we're good, we're not going to use this anymore? Or are you going to say, you know, we need to be able to recover this, anything 5 years and newer, we need to be able to recover and restart or start a branch off of that project. And then it also comes into the project management perspective of, are you delivering to your clients the output that you're promising? And so making sure that your project template hits all the right spot, the information in the reports, making sure that the project, all your commitments as far as valve takeoffs are as accurate as possible, and that you're not losing time reinventing the wheel every time you go through the process of kicking off a new project.
Awesome. Let's see, go to the next slide here. Oh. There we go. So kind of an overview. That's the why. An overview of what we're going to get into here. We're going to talk about environment selection. So that's kind of deciding where your project is going to live, be it on a network. Is it going to be like a SQLite, a SQL Server? Is it going to be Vault? Is it going to be BIM 360? Kind of talking about all those different items. Then we'll talk about some tagging. That's kind of self-explanatory, just tagging within the models. And finally, for today, we're going to talk about identifying custom properties, basically a workflow to kind of organize your custom properties a little better. So go ahead and jump to the next one. So straight into the environmental selection. All right, so we have laid out a group of the little boxes at the top, and that's our best practices, what we recommend. So even if you are using BIM 360 and Vault, we recommend that you maintain a template outside of that. So preferably in a secured location on a network drive, or you know, doesn't even hurt to have it on, say, like a backup drive, like a thumb drive or something like that, just in case, you know. And then using the latest version of SQL Server, and that kind of goes for everything, just making sure that everything is up to date. You're using the latest versions, just so you're not missing out on anything or things are working properly.
Yeah, and so some of these notes kind of just apply in various scenarios, like if you're using SQL Server, then you're not using BIM 360 or Vault. And the DBA also would apply this next note. So some groups and some companies are large enough to where they have within their IT group a designated database administration group. And so that team would be responsible for identifying any security concerns, making sure that the server is properly resourced, has enough RAM, has enough storage space, has a backup process. And so definitely if you do have those resources at your company, you want to include them in the conversations about what your SQL Server requirements are.
Absolutely. IT is your friend.
Yes, even though it doesn't always feel like it.
Yeah. So also,
we're all a team.
Yeah, we're all a team. So define read and write groups. So that's making sure that the correct people have permissions. You don't want just everybody to be able to go in and change your project template. That always turns out bad. And then also, let's see, BIM 360, Vault, LAN, VPN, or local. So that's really just deciding on which you would need. And that actually jumps us into our next section here.
Well, let me dig into that a little bit more. So
yeah, sure.
that one little box covers a lot of questions that we don't have all fleshed out here. But so what we're looking at right now, what we use to identify where the best environment is for your project to live are a couple questions. So first of all, if you need workflow controls, so for example, if after let's say I have an existing project that's a site or a facility, all the P&IDs represent the whole facility, and I want to be able to say, have an engineer or something at the engineering level kick off a process to say this P&ID needs to get modified for these aspects, have the designer execute those changes, and then have the file go to another review process for approval. So that's what I'm going to call workflow control. That scenario is best done inside of Autodesk Vault, because Vault has what they call electronic change orders. And so you can kick off a process like that. In addition, it has another capability in Vault called life cycles. And so by using Plant 3D inside of Vault, you can assign life cycles to drawings. And so, for example, we do this in our Plant 3D Boost project, to where if they're a work in progress, we can make changes to it. But then once we want it to be pushed out to the cloud for our customers to use, it goes to released, and that release process pushes it to BIM 360 so that people outside of our network can get access to it. So that is the main use case for Vault. So the other ramifications of that is Vault doesn't handle replication with Plant 3D. Vault can do it by itself, but when you add Plant 3D to it, the Plant 3D part doesn't replicate. And so typically we see Vault used at a single location where the designers are all fairly close. Now it has a little bit of better capability around, like if they're working from home, then they can just check stuff out and work locally. Whereas if you're working through a VPN, that isn't always practical. When they're abroad in the city or something like that, sometimes the performance can be too bad. But Vault lets you get a little bit further from the office, but it doesn't let you go like out of state, that type of range. A LAN would be when you have your project on a server. So you have a file share server set up somewhere. Again, the main criteria for this is probably our standard engineering firm working environment, where you run your business off a file server. Everyone is there in an office. So we would keep this kind of designated for a single office location, and then have multiple people, 5 to 15 to 20 to 40 designers all working off one project, or more sometimes. So with LAN, you generally are going to use SQL Server, especially once you get more than 3 to 5 users. SQL Server becomes a requirement. And then a local, we would generally use that only for testing, and with one designer. Generally, if it's on a C drive, no one else can use it, and so we limit our scenario for that. The big question about work sharing, though, is for BIM 360. So we would use BIM 360 in a scenario where you need to have multiple offices working around the country or around the world on a single project. And we use this in conjunction with our product 360 Sync, so that anything that is not within our project environment, we can synchronize with 360 Sync. So your shared content, your tool palettes, anything else like that would come through 360 Sync, and then Plant 3D handles BIM 360. Caleb, did I get everything on that? That was a lot of information.
I believe so. I think the VPN was one that was kind of missed. And, the VPN kind of goes hand in hand with the LAN, right? So VPN, we saw a lot of that whenever everybody was working from home last year, but they were in close proximity to the office. So really they're using their machines, right, at the office, but just from home. So it was a good temporary solution. But definitely we have a bunch of other options.
Yep. And so that kind of gets us back to this decision tree. We just kind of mapped out the decision for the database environment that you would use, whether you're going to use SQLite or SQL Server. If there's more than 3 users on either your mechanic IDs or your models. If that answer is yes, then you would need to next check to see whether or not you have or want automated maintenance or backup procedures. And then the answer for that, if it's yes, to SQL Server, because that has built-in automation. Now, SQL Server Express, we have scripts and other things that we can run to help automate the process, but those don't come available out of the box.
Yeah, additional configuration may be required.
Yes.
All right.
And feel free to go ahead and put anything in the Q&A. If you have any questions, feel free to let us know.
Absolutely. All right. Go ahead and jump to this next one. Okay, so this is actually the next topic. It's going to be tagging. So really, like I said, just like the previous slide, we're outlining our best practices up here at the top. So we have included a reference video for line groups from Dave here. And I believe, Misty, that's in resources. In the resources, I think it's going out to everybody. Yep, awesome.
It's actually on their console. It's labeled resource list, and it's at the very top.
Perfect. So this is a video that David put together about 2 years ago, I think maybe. And it kind of goes through the ins and outs of actually tagging your line groups and our preferred way, probably the best practice for it. So then jumping into the next one, let's see. Pipe supports and specialty non-unique tags. David,
so this is one where, like, out of the box, this is just speaking out of the box, specialty items and pipe supports don't enforce unique tags. So, for example, you could have P1 on multiple items within your model for a pipe support. Now, there is some configuration hacking we can do in certain environments to force unique tags for those items, but out of the box, that is not a capability. So just wanted to, at least when you're talking about tagging, you need to review that.
Absolutely. And then next, we recommend following PIP or company standards if they're already in place. But definitely every time we work with a customer and they're like, oh, well, should we use custom symbols? We always say, try and use PIP as much as possible. That's just the recommended. That's the industry standard. There's a reason it's the industry standard. So absolutely go ahead and do that. Oh, it looks like I think there may be an issue with the video link. Misty is going to work on that for us in the background here. So also, do not confuse line segment annotation with line group tagging. As a newbie to tagging, this is something that always confuses people. They're like, wait, but I did put it in the line segment, or excuse me, the line. And they're like, oh, no, that's the line segment, not the line group. So it happens all the time. It's just something that you kind of have to watch out for. So, and then
it also happens on the 3D side. People expect to be able to tag like the size, the service, and the spec when they start routing pipe. And it's just inappropriate to do it there because you can create a lot of extra duplicates for yourself.
Exactly. Another thing, tags come first before entering bulk content. That's something that whenever we do classes and things like that, I'm like, hey, if you put in more information and make sure your tags are correct before you put in that information, you're going to have a much better time. If you just start throwing everything in there, you're probably going to be missing some actual tags. You're going to be missing the correct information. So that's very important. Then instruments sometimes need index property as part of the format tag. Dave, you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so this is where in certain cases, I think with interlocks and other types of instrumentation, frequently you have the same field value shown, like FI 1001 might be used in a couple spots, but you actually have multiple instruments. And so adding an index will make it not visible. You wouldn't show the index as part of the instrument bubble, but it's still going to have like the same type and loop number on it. And so in some cases, it's appropriate to add an index property for your instrument tagging just to make sure that they're all physically unique, even if on the drawing they don't appear to be completely unique.
Great. Yeah, so With that, we can jump right into the tag workflow, and this one just flows right across, just like the other ones. So identifying fields that define uniqueness, right? Then jumping in, create the fields that you need, create a tag format, set as default, so set that tag format as the default, and then create tag validation report template. So kind of working from the back, the create a tag validation report template is a great way to actually go through and make sure that you're not missing things. It's good to kind of go back and spot check yourself, and in using this, you can actually go back and spot check yourself if you have a tag validation report set up.
And we can put in a link about the actual workflow. There's a help article we'll put in that goes through creating the fields, creating the tag format, and the rest of those things. But these are just some things that we do, when we're workshopping this and trying to figure out what to do next. Talking through with a client to figure out what really makes something unique. Is it the area and the number, the type and the number? Is it the service and the line number? Is it just the line number? Those are all parts of the conversation you need to have to figure out what really makes something unique across the project.
Awesome. And also to add to that, special customizations can be done. The little things to keep in mind down at the bottom. Special customizations can be done for unique things like specialty items. If you have some kind of odd properties that you're like, I need to have this in there too. This is very important. So additional customization is entirely possible. Mm-hmm. Then lastly, tag classes we have here. And this is really just kind of a list. This is a reference, if you will. Say, okay, I have my line groups, my valves, specialty items, instruments, equipment, and pipe supports. And these are your basic tag classes pretty much. So.
Yeah, so when you're looking for your PNIDs, take a glance through, make sure that the tags that you see in the PNID fall into one of these categories. And if they don't, or if you're not sure where they fit, then you need to work through that and identify the proper class to assign it to.
Awesome. Okay, so jumping into the next one is going to be, there we go, identifying custom properties. So this one is a pretty extensive workflow. We had to literally push it across 4 slides, just so we could really spread it out and you could actually see everything that we're talking about here. So it looks like, yeah, we're going to reference that video again for the line groups. That's the video that Dave put out is such a good video. We are constantly, I would say every question we get about line numbers, we go ahead and make sure that our customers have seen this video first. And that usually answers a lot of their questions. But then coming back, we can help a little more. So, and then also reviewing your property types and restrictions. And that kind of adds on to the different restrictions here. So your string list, your different property types, your string list, symbol list, calculated acquisitions, initializations, and Boolean. So.
Yeah, so these are all options when you're picking a property that you have to create and configure a property. So for example, status would be an example of a list. You might have existing, new, or demolition. Likewise for, on the 3D side, we have weld types like field, field fit, and shop. So those are different examples of a list type. Acquisition means it's a property that's going to be pulled from somewhere else. So for example, we can take the property from the service from the line group and make that show up on a valve so that you know what service that valve is being installed into. So that would be an example of an acquisition property. The rest of them are fairly straightforward. Symbol list is, I guess, not straight. Actually, they're not straightforward, are they? Symbol list and calculator are still a little complicated. Symbol list would be like allowing you to switch between normally closed symbology versus normally open. So the one has a hatch. Calculated is a way to combine multiple values together. We'll talk through a use case for that, but basically it lets us say, show me what the service and the number look like, or maybe switch around and do the number and then service, or add the spec and display that in a single field. And then string is just text and Boolean is just true or false. There is a bug that has been fixed in 2023 for Boolean values. I believe in prior versions, you could not select the true or the false from the property palette. You had to go through the data manager. So that has been fixed in 2023. And I think it might be coming out fixed in 2022 as well in an update. But I can't promise that.
Awesome. Okay, and then we jump into the building the property list. So this is just like we did before. This is just a workflow, kind of explaining the steps, asking you the questions. So list properties and annotations and reports. All right. So is it an ortho or an ISO? So intelligent ISO title blocks? Yes. So add the ISO title block properties to the list. All right. And then kind of the same for PIDs or orthos, add those to the block properties list. So they kind of handle them a little bit differently.
Yeah, so this is really about, like, as far as the stage of developing your project template goes, you need to sit down and figure out where to start, right? Because we have, let's say, 100 PIDs. Well, what's the starting point? So you need to pick a sample of your PIDs, and you're going to go through and say, identify what shows up in any of your text in your drawings. And you'll get a sample of your reports, line list, equipment list, and identify the properties that show up in those reports. And so you're going to work through, and the goal is, the reason we're doing this is we're just building out what our requirements are at this stage. And then the next stage, we'll go through the process of actually figuring out, well, how should we properly implement a property? And so, for example, here we're building a list, like, say, for pumps, we need horsepower, we need the phase, we need some other electrical and mechanical requirements. We need to add all those to a list so that we have a single thing that we can look at and consolidate our properties against to make sure we're not going to just duplicate stuff all over the place.
Awesome. Absolutely. All right, let's jump into the next slide, which is just compounding on this. There we go. Okay.
We did get a question.
Yeah.
How important is making sure the property descriptions match between acquisitions? Example is having the same property in two object types, but having one acquire the info from the other. I guess so. Like, let's say, hopefully I'm understanding the question. Let's say we're doing the service from a valve. We want the service for a valve to show up and pull that from the line. It's really more, in my opinion, it's more of a cosmetic issue. Functionally, the property value is going to show up as long as you have it linked correctly. So in my opinion, it's more cosmetic of, like, just saying line service or service. You don't have to use the exact same name for the property. Sometimes it's helpful to kind of prefix, like, say, if you're going to pull the service from the line group, and say line group _ service on the valve, just so people can really clearly tell where it comes from. But there's no requirements around that. So far, we haven't really developed any standards. I guess my natural tendency would be to just name it the same thing as the property that you're pulling it from. So hopefully that addresses the question.
Awesome. Okay, so this is actually jumping into the group properties, and this is the custom property decision tree, okay? So we're starting off here creating a calculated property, all right? Is that what you need to do? Obviously, you're probably asking yourself that question. Yes. So is the property a combination of others? So no, that's going to be, does the value change for every inserted object? If you answer yes, then it's a class property, not a CALS property.
So Caleb, it's going to help to have a little, probably, examples to talk through with this. And I'd like to clarify what I mean by group properties. Mm-hmm. So for example, on there are some properties that we want to show up a combination of others. So, like, let's say in some cases we don't have the tag, we don't have the service and the line number together in the tag, but we might want to, on a report, show the service and the line number all in one cell. And so that would be an example of a calculated property, because we want both of those properties to show up together all the time in one spot. And so that would be a chance to use a calculated property. Probably the most common place we see this is for the ISO line number, where we want to control the order of the service, the line number, and let's say the nominal size of the spec when it gets labeled on our ISO. So there's a help article that shows how to set that up. But that's one of the key places where we use a calculated property, because the single property is a combination of multiple property values.
Awesome.
Let's see. And so that's why the answer to that is yes, and then it's a combination of others. And so I think we might have gone the wrong direction. That arrow might need to be reversed. On the is the property combination of others to go up to yes.
Yeah.
And then, so does value change for every inserted object? So this would be like, let's say an instrument symbol. So like a pressure transmitter, every time we place a bubble for a pressure transmitter, we're going to want that to say the same thing. And so we could create a subclass underneath of our instruments for pressure transmitters, and then every time we insert that symbol, it's going to fill in the right value because it has the default value set as a class property. So that's one example. So these are, I guess, rather than like reading through all these, this is intended to be a guide to help you kind of step through and ask some questions about what is true about your property values. And so hopefully it's clear enough without some examples, without more examples, but we can work through some of those as well. Let's see.
All right.
What's another example?
Okay. Sorry.
I do want to highlight, so over on the right, there's is the drawing in ISO. So with isometrics, one of the key ways that we fill in title block information is by using the P3D language properties, because that's the only way to really provide information at the drawing title block level. And so that's why that is a consideration there. And so hopefully you guys will take this, review it, let us know if you have any feedback or comments or questions, and we'll come out with some examples over the next few weeks and post some articles that show, what does it look like to walk through this decision tree for different types of properties that you might run into.
Absolutely. Awesome. Okay, let's jump into this next one. All right. Oh, this is actually, I think, just a larger view of that one. Okay.
Nice.
This one is just another larger view of that other one. So, yeah, absolutely. So doing this webinar, we're kind of laying the groundwork for people to go ahead and pick up this and actually put it to real world test, right? So absolutely, please. I mean, that's the whole point of our Plant Innovation Board and Council and all that, is to get people to give us feedback. So is this working for you? Are you having issues? What is the pain points? What are the other pain points? So awesome. I believe that is everything. If anybody has any questions, we can answer those.
We do have one more slide. Do you want to show that yet or not?
Yeah, so the next slide is actually a preview for the next webinar. So coming in part 2, we're going to discuss tool palettes. We're going to discuss a lot of blocks, as you can see, ISO title blocks, ortho title blocks, P90 title blocks, things like that. Creating P90 symbols in batch, that's always a fun one. And then annotations, that kind of works very close with the creating the symbols as well. So.
Perfect.
Awesome.
I do have a question here. Someone did mention, if this is episode 1, when can they expect episode 2 and where can we register? I've got that information, but if you guys wanted to touch on it, or I could touch on it.
Yeah, you can go ahead. I think you know the schedule a little better than us. Yeah.
I do. Okay. So episode 2 is coming up Tuesday, May 10th at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can register at www.asti.com/calendar, or just simply click on the link in the resource list. But yeah, that is coming up rather soon. So we're excited to have you guys back to talk through some additional content there.
Absolutely.
I do not see any more questions in the chat. But I do want to thank everyone for joining us today and spending your time with us. I do trust it was meaningful and impactful for your businesses. We do look forward to seeing you on future webinars. And before we go, one more second, a question just came through. Is there a way to customize drawing format uniquely between plant and P&ID?
Unfortunately, so I'm assuming that's a drawing file name format. And unfortunately, you can only have one per project. And so it doesn't delineate or differentiate between plant and P&ID. The same file name format is used across both.
Okay. And also, that is 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I think 11 p.m. would be entirely too late. So thank you guys for that. But thank you, everyone. We very much appreciate you joining this webinar, and we look forward to seeing you on future webinars. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Y'all have a good one.